Please, they're freezing Emily. Carter stood behind the diner counter, staring through a frost-covered window as snow blew sideways under the streetlights. Watching 25 motorcycles grind to a stop in her parking lot, ice clinging to black leather, red blood staining the white snow, three men slumped and barely moving, her cash register holding just $11, and her 5-year-old son Noah shaking behind her wrapped in blankets. Because it was Christmas Eve in the dead of winter, the power was out, the heater was dead, the wind was howling, and every instinct told her not to open that door. Yet she did anyway, and what happened next would bring 1,500 roaring motorcycles to her doorstep, turn strangers into family, turn a broke single mother into a legend, and turn one impossible act of kindness into a winter miracle that echoed across the country. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The phone had rung earlier at 11:47 p.m., a cold, careless voice from the power company telling her the grid was down for at least 48 hours and to find alternative shelter before the line went dead. And Emily had laughed bitterly because alternative shelter wasn't an option when you owned a failing roadside diner and had a child to keep warm. Especially after her ex-husband texted to say he couldn't send child support this month, even though she'd seen pictures of his new boat online. So she pulled Noah close as he whispered that his stomach hurt from hunger and cold, lit the gas stove with old matches from her late mother's recipe box, and tried to make something warm when a deep rumble rolled through the frozen night and headlights appeared through the blizzard like ghosts, followed by pounding on the door and a broken voice begging for help, saying his brothers were dying. And when Noah tugged her sleeve and said that big men only cry when things are really bad, Emily remembered her mother's words about kindness being about who you are, not who deserves it, whispered a prayer, and opened the door. The men poured in, steaming and shaking, dragging one unconscious biker whose lips were blue and chest barely moving, explaining through chattering teeth that they'd been riding through the mountains delivering Christmas toys to sick kids when the storm hit and the cold took one of them down. And a nurse among them said he had maybe hours without proper care. So Emily ran to her mother's untouched medicine cabinet and brought back expired antibiotics, knowing they were a gamble, but also knowing doing nothing was worse. And while the nurse worked and the men stripped frozen gear and huddled for warmth, Emily boiled water, brewed her last coffee, and watched hardened bikers gently talk to her son, answering his questions honestly and listening when he said his mommy told him not to judge people by how they look. Hours passed in that winter-locked diner as the storm screamed outside. The sick man fought for breath, and Noah walked over and placed his small hand on the biker's forehead, telling him not to be scared and saying that his own dad left too and that maybe it wasn't anyone's fault. Words so simple they broke grown men apart. And when a young biker rewired the frozen junction box using parts from his own motorcycle to bring the lights back on, Emily realized these men gave without hesitation because they understood cold, hunger, and being unwanted. As dawn crept in pale and weak, Emily mixed flour, eggs, and oil into her grandmother's desperation fritters, frying them in batches while the smell filled the diner. And she watched tough men eat in silence like children tasting safety for the first time. And when the sick biker stabilized, he admitted he'd heard Noah's words and had spent years believing his daughter was better off without him. And Emily told him that love meant showing up no matter how scared you were, advice she wished she could give her own past. When the storm finally broke and the sun rose over a world turned white and still, the biker leader told her to look again outside. And that's when she heard it. Not thunder, but engines, a distant growl growing louder as a dark line crested the road. splitting into hundreds of motorcycles, then more, until 1,500 riders from 6 states filled the highway, having ridden through the night because word spread about a woman who opened her door in a blizzard, fed strangers, and gave away her last medicine without asking for anything. And Emily's legs nearly gave out as she realized this kindness had multiplied beyond anything she imagined. Riders came forward one by one, some thanking her for helping when others once had not, some crying as they shared stories of brothers lost to cold roads and closed doors, until the leader pressed an envelope into her hands containing enough money to erase her debts, fix the diner, and buy heat and clothes for her son, telling her it was a Christmas gift from people who remembered what humanity felt like because of her. And as Noah asked if they were still poor, and then if he could have more fritters, Emily laughed through tears for the first time in years, holding her child while the winter sun glinted off endless chrome outside. Even townspeople who once judged her diner came by, drawn by the noise and the story, sitting beside bikers they'd feared, sharing food and laughter, and as the riders eventually rolled out again to deliver toys to waiting children in hospitals, leaving a few behind to help with repairs and care for the recovering man, Emily stood in her warm diner, watching snow melt off the windows, realizing that on the coldest night of her life, she chose compassion over fear, and that choice had turned a frozen Christmas Eve into a season of hope, proving that sometimes in the deepest winter, one open door is enough to bring the light back. Emily stood quietly as Lily faced her father, watching how years of pain had carved deep lines into Marcus's face, making him look older than he should have been. And she understood that it wasn't age that did this, but winter after winter of regret, loneliness, and guilt that froze a man from the inside out. Emily gently touched Lily's arm and whispered that being here still mattered, that some things could be undone if she chose to try. And Lily nodded before walking slowly to the booth, sitting beside her father and taking his trembling hand. When Marcus opened his eyes and saw his daughter, the sound that escaped him was raw and broken, like something cracking apart after being frozen too long, and he sobbed Lily's name as she leaned close, telling him she was here, apologizing through tears while he apologized back, both of them drowning in words they had held inside for years. Lily told him she forgave him, really forgave him, and that was the moment Marcus completely collapsed, crying in her shoulder as if all the cold inside him was finally melting away. Emily stepped out into the hallway, closed the door softly, and leaned against the wall, letting herself cry again in the quiet hum of heaters and distant winter wind. Tommy found her there and said it sounded like something healing, and Emily agreed because it felt like watching ice finally break on a frozen river. He told her she had something special, that people changed around her, that broken things seemed to soften just by being near her, and though she tried to deny it, his words stayed with her. When Ghost appeared with a wrench and said the water heater and electrical lines were fixable if he could get parts from town 12 miles away through the snow, Emily tried to stop him, but he insisted, saying he wanted to help, not because he had to, but because it mattered. And when he left, promising to come back and learn how to make her fritters, Tommy teased her gently, pointing out the way Ghost looked at her, the way broken people recognized each other in winter without needing words. By noon, the diner felt less like a building and more like a shelter, as townspeople arrived carrying heaters, food, blankets, and quiet kindness, even those who had never supported her before. And when Harold Donovan handed her a check for renovations, grumbling about fritters while clearly caring more than he wanted to admit, Emily felt something shift inside her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Iron Jack showing hundreds of sick children surrounded by bikers at the hospital, smiling like winter had finally loosened its grip. And Emily saved the photo as a reminder for darker days. Lily later came out, exhausted but peaceful, saying her father was truly sleeping for the first time in years. And when she asked how Emily had known to bring her there, Emily explained that guilt and loneliness were illnesses medicine couldn't cure, that Marcus had spent 8 winters writing letters he never sent, punishing himself for mistakes he couldn't fix. Lily confessed she had kept every letter, reading them alone at night, missing her father while hating herself for missing him, and now she was terrified that forgiveness might come too late. Emily told her about losing her own mother to cancer in winter, about all the words she never got to say, and reminded Lily that time was a gift, not something to waste on fear. The satellite phone rang later, and Iron Jack told Emily to turn on the news, where a tired face appeared on national television as the woman whose open door during a blizzard had sparked a wave of kindness across states. And though the attention made her uncomfortable, she realized she was no longer invisible. Calls poured in, interviews requested. Even her ex-husband suddenly reached out after months of silence, and Emily deleted his message without hesitation. When reporters arrived outside, she faced one directly in the cold air, telling her she wasn't a hero, just someone who opened a door, and that the real story belonged to those who rode through the storm, not her. Inside, Ghost returned with supplies, sensing her distress immediately, warning her that men like her ex only showed up when there was something to take, and his words felt uncomfortably true. Kevin arrived soon after, polished and smiling, accusing her of raising their son around criminals, threatening court, custody, and money, and when he left after delivering his ultimatum, Emily felt the warmth drain from the room despite all the heaters running. Iron Jack reminded her that absent fathers didn't win easily, that he had fought and won for his own child years ago, and promised to help her fight too. Marcus, still weak but steady, told her Kevin was coming because he smelled opportunity, and warned her to prepare to gather witnesses, records, proof, because good deeds alone didn't protect you from bad people. When the bikers returned at sunset, engines rumbling like thunder through the cold, the diner filled again with warmth, noise, and purpose, and as Emily cooked real meals with supplies they brought, Ghost worked beside her, finally admitting he stayed because he had seen her give everything she had even when she had nothing, because people like that were rare in a cold world. Then Kevin returned, openly threatening court and money, claiming he wanted custody now that there was attention and donations involved. But Iron Jack shut him down, calling a lawyer immediately, reminding Emily that family protected family. The lawyer arrived that night, sharp and experienced, explaining that custody battles were about evidence, not fairness, and that Emily needed to document everything because Kevin would try to paint her as unfit using fear and appearances. Though terrified, Emily agreed, knowing Noah's future depended on it. When a documentary offer came with enough money to protect her diner and fight for her son, Emily accepted despite hating the spotlight, choosing control over fear. Days passed in a blur of cameras, winter light, and quiet strength. And when Kevin's lawyer pushed for an early hearing, Ghost reassured her with his own painful childhood story, promising he would never let Noah be taken the way he had been. When the cameras finally asked what she wanted people to know, Emily said kindness was just a choice between fear and love, between closing a door or opening it, and she had chosen love. As winter settled outside and the diner glowed warm against the snow, Emily Carter stood surrounded by people who had become family, facing a fight she never wanted but was ready to win, because this time she wasn't alone. Emily watched Noah laugh as he climbed into Tommy's lap, his small boots still dusted with snow from outside, while the heater hummed softly against the winter night. And when Tommy copied Noah's silly handshake with fist bumps, finger snaps, and a ridiculous chicken-like wiggle, the diner filled with warm laughter that felt stronger than any fire, because this was family built by choice, not blood, not obligation. And Emily knew deep in her heart that no man, no lawyer, no courtroom was ever going to take this away from her. The moment shattered when the door opened and Patricia Donovan rushed in, cheeks red from the cold, scarf half undone, her voice shaking as she warned Emily that a man in a gray suit had been asking questions around town about the diner and about Noah. Questions that made Emily's stomach drop like ice water. Questions about school schedules, shopping habits, visitors, the kind of questions meant to build a case, not concern. Ghost was beside her instantly, his face hard as winter stone, recognizing the danger right away. Knowing this was Kevin reaching in from far away, trying to turn Emily's life into evidence. And though Emily felt the walls closing in, Ghost told her calmly to change nothing, to keep being a good mother, to document everything, while he stepped back out into the snow to make sure the man in the gray suit understood he wasn't unseen. As Ghost disappeared into the night, Patricia stayed behind, trembling, and finally broke down, apologizing for years of cold looks, gossip, and judgment, admitting she had seen Emily as a problem instead of a person. Until the night Emily opened her door during a blizzard and fed strangers with her last $11, something that shattered Patricia's carefully built walls. She offered money, witnesses, help of any kind, and Emily hugged her, realizing winter had a way of cracking people open and letting truth breathe. By morning, the cold light of Tuesday brought the reality of court closer, and Emily left Noah with Patricia and Harold before driving through frost-covered roads to meet the lawyer, where she learned Kevin was accusing her of being unfit, of raising her child in danger, even twisting Ghost's past into a threat. But the lawyer's calm confidence steadied her, explaining that evidence mattered more than fear, that missed child support, absence, and witnesses would tell the real story. Wednesday passed in a blur of snowflakes, phone calls, and television clips, and by evening, Emily sat frozen at the kitchen table, terrified of the next day, until Ghost sat beside her and spoke about his own childhood, about never having someone fight for him, and how tomorrow an entire room would fight for Noah, words that warmed her more than any heater. That night, with the wind howling outside and frost crawling up the windows, Ghost admitted he wanted a future with her once this fight was over, not promises, just hope, and Emily said yes, holding on to that small light through the longest night. Thursday morning arrived sharp and cold, and the courtroom felt smaller than the winter sky pressing down on her. Kevin polished and smiling like nothing had ever been broken, but the judge's questions cut through him like ice, exposing 2 years of absence, unpaid support, and sudden interest fueled by money, while witness after witness spoke of Emily's kindness, her care, her child's happiness, until Ghost stood and told the truth simply, about a mother who would freeze before letting her child go hungry, about a boy who was loved fiercely. And when the judge finally ruled that Emily kept full custody and Kevin was ordered to pay what he owed, the relief hit like spring sunlight breaking through snow. Outside, Emily called the diner and told Noah they had won, and his calm little voice said he always knew, as if faith came easier to children. By the time they returned, the diner was decorated, the town gathered, and laughter filled the space that once held fear And as the winter night deepened, partnerships were offered, families reunited, and plans made for futures that felt impossible just days before. Weeks passed, then months, and the diner reopened brighter and warmer, becoming a place of rest for travelers and bikers alike. A place where kindness was served with every meal, and when Ghost finally asked to stop sleeping on the couch, Emily said yes without fear, because winter had taught her that warmth was meant to be shared. They married in the diner surrounded by snow and laughter, Noah grinning in a tiny suit, and life moved forward not perfectly, but honestly, filled with people who chose each other every day. 1 year later, as snow fell softly outside and children laughed over free lunches, Emily stood watching the life she had built, realizing it all began the moment she opened her door on a frozen night, proving that kindness multiplies, love survives storms, and even in the deepest winter, one brave choice can turn strangers into family and cold nights into forever homes.